I grew up in a predominantly white area, where life was relatively easy for me as a white student. I had caring parents, respectful friends, and a fairly typical high school experience. Despite being your stereotypical nerdy white boy with glasses, I had a small group of friends and never caused any trouble. Where it begins. In my high school, there was a group of popular troublemakers who were part of the football and basketball teams. They were known for their bullying and disruptive behavior, but they somehow managed to avoid expulsion and became known as super seniors, students who were held back until they graduated or turned 19. They frequently targeted me and my friends with their bullying, but we had grown accustomed to it over the years. During our senior year, we were focused on maintaining our grades while dealing with their antics. In the second semester, I enrolled in engineering physics, a class recommended by my previous physics teacher. I quickly realized that many students saw it as an easy elective where you could simply build cool things and pass. However, the tests were still based on physics principles. The tests were taken in pairs, and one day I found myself partnered with Chad, one of my friendly neighborhood bullies. Chad was known for slacking off in class and relying on the smart kids to do the work for him. Despite this, I decided to show him how to complete the test instead of doing it for him, hoping he would learn something. But Chad dismissed my suggestion, preferring that I do the work for him. When I hesitated, he threatened to harm me or my sister if I didn't comply. Fearing the consequences, I reluctantly completed the test on his behalf. I was angry and scared, but I didn't report the incident to the police or school authorities, knowing it could make matters worse. It took a few weeks for my injuries, including a black eye, lacerations on my face, and a torn earlobe to heal. But during that time, I swore that Chad would regret everything if I ever crossed paths with him again. Little did I know that our paths would intersect 6 years later. The encounter. Years passed, and I obtained a job with a security company after earning my associate's degree. I primarily dealt with truck drivers, and in the 4 years I had worked there, I had only written 3 major incident reports. One day, Chad unexpectedly walked into my workplace. Initially, I didn't recognize him, but when he handed me his expired driver's license, memories flooded back, reminding me of his repulsive face. I had completely forgotten about Chad, but now he stood before me. Unaware that I knew who he was, I treated him like any other customer. However, I realized this was my chance to make him remember me and feel the pain I had endured. With my background in criminal justice, I knew the laws and regulations in my state, and I decided to use Chad's expired license to my advantage. I instructed Chad to pick up a specific trailer and informed him that the site manager had just called, stating that we would need it later for another load. While this was true and not part of my plan, I seized the opportunity. Chad complained, worried about being fired if he didn't take his break on time and how he was already on his dispatcher's watch list. His pleas only fueled my determination to waste as much of his time as possible. I called the yard dog, a driver responsible for moving trailers, and informed him that a driver was refusing to drop off his trailer and needed to be escorted off the property. The yard dog arrived, positioning his truck in front of Chad's tractor, preventing him from moving forward. He ordered Chad to immediately unhitch the trailer. For a moment, Chad remained outside his truck, shouting obscenities. Eventually, the yard dog and I retreated to the guard shack in case Chad became violent. Chad made a grave mistake. He hopped back into his truck, maneuvered around the yard dog's vehicle while it was parked at the guard shack, and sped away. I promptly informed my supervisor, who advised me to call the police since trailer theft was a felony in our state. I provided them with the tractor number, Chad's name, a description, and details about the trailer and his direction of travel. About an hour later, a police cruiser arrived, and the officer requested my presence. I provided a detailed account of the incident, acting as a witness and making an official statement for their report. The police eventually apprehended Chad and charged him with the crime. They needed my testimony to build their case, and I made sure to mention his expired license and everything else. To the best of my knowledge, Chad will face at least a year of prison time, as felonies carry a minimum sentence of 1 year. Additionally, he will likely be fired from his trucking company. Although I was merely doing my job, I ensured that the consequences of Chad's actions from all those years ago caught up with him. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read about my experience. I hope some of you found it satisfying. And remember, if someone's job is to tell you what to do, just do it. In the kitchen where I worked a few years ago, there was this truly awful guy who was universally despised by everyone. He had aspirations of becoming a supervisor, but his actions only fueled the animosity towards him. One of his tactics involved taking pictures of the dirty equipment at the end of a shift and sending them to the owners, attempting to shift blame onto others for not cleaning, even though it was his responsibility. Despite working in a kitchen filled with fryers, ovens, and loose food, he nonchalantly wore flip-flops and constantly had his AirPods in, oblivious to his surroundings. This not only violated occupational health and safety regulations, but it also made it nearly impossible to get his attention. We had to shout repeatedly to make him take out an AirPod, only to be met with a vacant expression on his face. I confronted him about this issue multiple times, but he always came up with flimsy excuses. Being relatively new to the job, I hesitated to escalate the matter, fearing the consequences. Looking back, however, I regret not reporting him to the owners, although I doubt they would have taken any action. On one particular evening during cleanup, a situation arose that further exemplified his infuriating behavior. As we were tidying up following the usual routine of splashing water and mopping, I meticulously cleaned my section while he tended to his own. But then he deliberately splashed water into my freshly cleaned area. I immediately reprimanded him, instructing him not to do it again. After cleaning up the mess he created, I prepared to leave. To my disbelief, he repeated his actions, drenching the same area with water. Having already finished my work and having explicitly asked him not to repeat this behavior in that specific spot, I made the decision to leave it as it was and departed, assuming he would rectify the situation later. To my surprise, the following day, the kitchen staff informed me that the detestable guy would no longer be returning. In fact, he had been hospitalized and would be returning to India. As the story unfolded, it turned out that he had come in early that morning, wearing his usual shoddy flip-flops, and slipped on the very puddle of water he had created the previous night. It was a consequence he wouldn't have faced if he had been wearing appropriate kitchen footwear. His leg was broken, and he ultimately decided to quit. I managed to escape any repercussions for my part in this incident, partly because I didn't reveal that I played a role, and partly because his choice of footwear and his overall behavior had made him so universally detested. People were relieved to see him go, so I suppose I inadvertently brought about some form of suitable revenge for his atrocious behavior. This incident took place in late November last year, and although I wasn't directly involved, I heard about it from others. I work at a wonderful Chinese-American dim sum restaurant in the city, and we have a loyal group of regular customers. Among them is an elderly couple who have been coming in regularly for tea and dim sum since we opened, even during the pandemic. Due to city regulations, we started requesting proof of vaccination and ID from our customers. Strangely enough, the staff had never asked this particular couple for their vaccination status until our newly hired front-of-house host brought it up after realizing the oversight. As expected, it turned out that the elderly regulars hadn't been vaccinated. When they were informed that they couldn't be in the restaurant without proof of vaccination, they became upset. The woman, whom we'll call Old Chinese Karen, threatened to call the manager and went ahead to dial their personal mobile number. The manager explained that there could be potential fines from the city if such violations were discovered and firmly stated that the couple would need to show proof of vaccination before dining again. Despite their objections, the old couple finished their meal and declared in no uncertain terms that they would never return to our restaurant. One might assume that would be the end of the story, but it wasn't. The very next day, they arrived with their extended family, a group of about 20 people. Everyone in the group, except for the elderly couple, had proof of vaccination. Old Karen predictably threw a tantrum when informed that she couldn't join the rest of her family and tried to trip the host into allowing her entry. However, our experienced host, unyielding and well-versed in the industry, firmly enforced the rules. Karen proceeded to call the manager once again, but received the same response: no entry without proof of vaccination. By this point, everyone was fed up with the situation, and the family decided to send the elderly couple back home via Uber. Before leaving, old Karen made a dramatic proclamation, warning the host and the manager that they would regret the day they embarrassed her, and threatened to call the owner. True to her word, she made the call, but was met with a resolute message. Without proof of vaccination, she would not be welcome at the restaurant. Needless to say, she was far from pleased with this response. All she could manage to say was, "We're never coming back here again." However, it turns out we still know where she lives, and interestingly enough, she continues to order delivery from our restaurant to this day. Let me start with a quick summary. The entitled parent in this story is my own mother, who used my identity to open a bank account and hide funds from the IRS. She was like a combination of a boomer and a mega Karen, a true narcissist. When I was around 15 years old, my mother secretly opened a bank account in my name at her credit union, making herself a joint account holder. I had absolutely no knowledge of its existence. I was just a teenager without a driver's license or a job. Fast forward to my 20s, when I was a college dropout struggling to find work due to financial aid issues caused by my mother's high income. I received an angry letter from the IRS about unpaid taxes. They claimed that money had appeared in my account and was transferred to another account without proper tax payment. My bewildered mind couldn't comprehend what was happening. I had no idea where this money was coming from. This led to months of stressful phone calls and exchanges of letters with the IRS, reaching a point where they accused me of committing a crime. I was on the phone with them, sobbing uncontrollably, desperately trying to make sense of the situation. Spoiler alert. It turned out my mother had been using the account to evade taxes, and it had worked when I was a minor. But now, at the age of 20, Uncle Sam wanted his share. For months, I handled all the phone calls and letters while my mother was at work. As a college dropout with no school or job, I was at home, available to address these issues. Meanwhile, I was aggressively applying for any job within driving distance, relying on my old gas-guzzling '96 Ford Explorer that barely got 10 miles per gallon on a good day. Eventually, I managed to speak with an IRS agent high up enough in the hierarchy to get some clarity. They informed me that there was indeed a bank account in my name, with my mother listed as a joint account holder. She had all the necessary information, including my social security number, date of birth, her maiden name, the name of my first pet, and the street I grew up on. After all, she's my mother, so she should know those things, right? I informed the IRS that they should do whatever was necessary to close that account, and I provided them with my mother's contact information. To this day, my mother remains clueless about how the IRS uncovered her deceitful scheme, and I intend to keep that secret forever. She ended up owing around $15,000 in back taxes, which she reluctantly paid using her own nest egg that she had been accumulating in my name. I couldn't care less if I'm written out of the will, even though she doesn't even know what read it is. Miracles can happen. F you, Karen.